Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience as we sort out congregational chazarai. Yeah. So I don't have a new piece on the website, but I will share with you the text for today on the share screen. And here we are, right? Chapter 6 of Pirkei Avot, teaching Mishnah number 3. Okay? One who learns from a colleague, one chapter, one halakha, one verse, one expression, even one letter, is obliged to show respect to that colleague. And this we learn from David, king of Israel, who learned two things from Achitophel. Now, I know that there's an asterisk there. Just pay no attention to that, right? He learned two things from Achitophel, and yet called him his master, his guide, his dear friend. And he quotes the verse from the Psalms, which spells that out. It follows that if King David, who learned only two things from Achitophel, called him his master and guide and dear friend, then one who learns from a colleague one chapter, one halakha, one verse, one expression, or even one letter, is obliged to show respect. Honor and Torah are synonymous, as it is written, the wise shall inherit honor. Good and Torah are synonymous, as it is written, and this is a verse that all of you know, Kila kachtov natati lachem. I give you good doctrine, forsake not my Torah. Okay, so first of all, the fact David learned two things from Achitophel. Who was Achitophel? Achitophel was an advisor to the king. And according to the Talmud, David learned two things from him. One was to study with a companion, someone who would help you, sharpen your understanding. And the other thing was to pray with humility. And what makes this teaching especially notable is that Achitophel was the only one in King David's inner circle who joined in a rebellion against King David, the one led by David's son, Absalom. Okay? So even though Achitophel was ultimately a traitor to King David, the king still regarded him as his teacher. So, how much the more so should we revere those from whom we learned much more? It's also noteworthy that he showed such respect to one of his teachers. And I want to acknowledge that the rabbis are doing a little bit of rereading the Bible in making King David out to be someone who respected Torah learning, which is kind of fanciful, especially since Torah, in the sense that the rabbis understand it, didn't really exist as a text in the time of King David. Nonetheless, that's what the text suggests. And it's obvious that kings normally receive honor rather than give out honors. But King David here acknowledges the wisdom he learned from someone else. And so, those of us who are commoners, is everybody, right? We should do no less, and we should acknowledge whatever we've been given by our own teachers. Showing honor to teachers in Judaism is a very serious matter. The Talmud ranks the honor that is due to a teacher together with the honor that is due to parents, which we all know is part of the Ten Commandments. And if a particular teacher of Torah is the one who is primarily responsible for shaping a person's views, then the honor due him, say the rabbis, is even higher than the honor that is due to parents. Why? Because parents create our physical existence, but a teacher of Torah helps to give us the character and the spiritual values which help us to form meaningful lives. So hopefully in this respect, our parents were also our teachers and also gave us spiritual values. The author of our teaching knows that most people don't have unlimited time to spend on formal learning of Torah, and you may not necessarily have access to the best possible teachers, right? Which, that for some people, that could be a great excuse for doing nothing. Well, I can't find, the really good teachers. They're not here. They're not available online. Therefore, I'm just gonna pass, right? Well, what the teaching tells us is in the end, everyone has something to teach. Right? We should never pass up an opportunity to learn when the right person to teach us is there. And we should be grateful for those opportunities. This kind of builds on what we learned from Ben Zoma back in chapter 4, who said, "Who is wise? One who learns from every person." And as one of my colleagues, Rabbi Martin Cohen, puts it, the whole world is a classroom. Right? And that's the way that we should look at the world. And that's the way we should look at whatever opportunities we have to gain knowledge. We all know that the best learning is by example. Children watch their parents very carefully on how they talk to each other and how they talk to the cashier at the supermarket and the waiter at the restaurant and the stranger in line. Right? Even when no one else is watching them, kids are watching them. The 20th century sage Rav Kook taught, "The pure righteous do not complain of the dark, but they increase the light. They do not complain of evil, but they increase justice. They do not complain of heresy, but increase faith. They do not complain of ignorance, but increase wisdom." In other words, no matter who's there, you always should function in such a way as to increase light, increase justice, right? However you treat the next person down the line, our children are watching and learning from us, okay? Comments and questions up to here. Anyone? Yes, Roberto.
No, what you were saying about teaching, I think is very important, especially with the children, because they get to know what you do, and they kind of sometimes repeat whatever you do. So it's very important to teach properly to downline or children, whatever.
Yes, I found with our children that they were always looking, even when I didn't think they were looking, and they were listening. And sometimes I got things put back to me that I wished I hadn't said or done in the first place.
Yeah.
Children are great at that.
Yeah. Okay, that's my comment.
Yeah. Anyone else? All right, so let's go to the next teaching. All right. This is the way of Torah. Oh, no. Yeah, this is the way of Torah. In other words, the way that people should live when they are learning Torah. Okay? Eat a salty crust of bread, ration your drinking water, sleep on the ground, live a life of privation, exhaust yourself in Torah study. this is not exactly how I did things, but this is what they're saying, okay? And they say, if you live in this way, you will be happy and all will go well with you, meaning you will be happy in this world, all will go well with you in the world to come. Now, this piece doesn't say that the wealthy have to give up their wealth as a condition for study. It says if you're not wealthy, that's not an excuse for avoiding it. Learn as best as you can according to your circumstances, even if it's only from borrowed books and free websites, even if it's only 10 minutes a day, because everyone can do that, right? And Torah is so important and so vital, you have to be willing to give up something in order to learn and practice it. Hopefully you don't have to be living on rationed bread and water or to sleep on the ground. But even if you have to give up some material comfort, in the end, you're likely to be happy that you did it. Because when you put Torah at the center of life, everything else is secondary. And there is a certain spiritual satisfaction that goes with that. And that is more important than many material pleasures. Now, you know, generally, Judaism rejects this kind of ascetic approach, right? So this teaching represents something of a minority opinion, I think, among the sages. And some of the commentators on this Mishnah try to limit it a little bit. For instance, Rashi says that it means that even if you are so poor that you live in hardship, you're still obligated to study Torah. It's not ideal to be poor, but you still have to live a life that is consistent with the Torah. All the more so are we obligated to learn something if we live in the kind of prosperity that most of us share today. The mainstream view on this subject is summarized in Maimonides. And here I quote to you from Maimonides' Mishnah Torah. If a person should say, because jealousy, lust, and honor, etc., are the wrong path, which remove a person from the world, therefore I will go to the other extreme and not eat meat nor drink wine, nor marry, nor live in a nice home or wear nice clothing, and so on and so forth. This is a bad path, says Maimonides. It is sinful, and it is forbidden to follow it. Our sages taught, are you not satisfied with what the Torah has forbidden, that you wish to forbid yourself other things as well? So that's the position of Maimonides. Don't put more restrictions on yourself than the law already places upon us. The law has enough restrictions, and that's, you don't have to go beyond that. The Maharal of Prague makes a couple of other points about this teaching. His opinion is, first of all, that this teaching is not intended for everyone. Because if living a life of deprivation will weaken your ability to learn, then we don't ask that and we don't want that. The other thing is, if a person is wealthy and can afford to study in comfort, he shouldn't deny himself those comforts. Maharal was maybe talking a little bit about himself because he was independently wealthy. So he says what a wealthy person can sacrifice is to give up his involvement with investments, dedicate all his time and attention to learning. Well, that's exactly what the Maharal did in the 16th century. He let other people manage his possessions. He devoted himself full-time to Torah and wrote many, many books and taught and learned a great deal. Rabbi Martin Cohen notes that nowadays we tend to think that the better a school is, the more beautiful it will be, the more state-of-the-art it will be. You know, the dorm rooms will be beautiful, the cafeterias will have many and certainly healthy options. Our teacher here says, don't focus on the externals, the creature comforts, the physical pleasures which often distract us. It's much easier to be distracted by luxury than by simplicity. So, comments or questions up to here? Yes, Lou.
It seems to me that this may be a teaching that the Haredi fall back on when all they do is study Torah and don't work and don't serve in the military in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that or not?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, it is definitely a minority opinion within the tradition. But that's the problem with minority opinions in Jewish life. You know, you can always fall back on that. Right? You say, well, you know, it's right there in Pirkei Avot. Right? So, yeah, I think they do fall back on it. But not entirely, because they believe that they're entitled to support from the community. Because I guarantee you that most Haredim who study full-time are not doing so eating a salty crust of bread. They're probably not living a wealthy life either, but they're not deprived particularly. I don't know, maybe their wives are deprived, but maybe not, but probably not them. Okay. Other comments or questions? Okay, so let me go on to number 5. It's a very short teaching to make up for the following one, which is, you know, about a day long. So here's number 5. Do not seek high position. Do not covet honor. Let your deeds exceed your learning. Do not crave the table of kings. Your table is greater than theirs, and your crown greater than their crowns. Your employer can be relied on to compensate you for your labors. So here and in the next Mishnah, there is a comparison between status that is hereditary and status that is earned, right? We all know that even in Jewish life, sometimes status is hereditary. Right? In the Hasidic world, sometimes it's, you know, status, the leadership gets passed on within the family. Right? The status of a scholar that is based on learning alone and not by, you know, anything hereditary. It seems to say that the crown of Torah is greater than the crown of the priesthood or even of royalty, which is something we dealt with a while back in Pirkei Avot. And of course, you couldn't aspire to become king. Couldn't even become a Kohen if you weren't one to begin with, right? But anyone could at least hope to become a Torah scholar. Right? And while this teaching tells us that people should pursue Torah, you shouldn't seek the honor that people gain in recognition of having learned Torah. So don't seek greatness for yourself. Let your deeds exceed your learning so that you live a life of greatness. Don't even crave what kings have, right? Because, you know, their glory, it could be very superficial. Better to have integrity because that's the thing that lasts, right? The real crown will come to you by way of your reputation and perhaps even in the world to come. We can also read this teaching as a reminder not to be caught up in the temptation to make work and status and material things more than they really are. Now, back in 1980, Dr. Bruno Bettelheim, Remember him? He wrote that today's popular conviction is that life is a rat race. And people get so engrossed in that they tend to push away matters of the soul. And they may not even realize that they're avoiding the quest for ultimate meaning. God forbid that that should happen to any of us. And we may be very envious of the wealthy and the powerful, but in real life, they're often not so successful and not so happy. A couple of years ago, I read a biography of one of the most successful comedians in history, Johnny Carson, right? We all remember Johnny Carson, right? Some of you probably enjoyed him very much. And he was a tremendous success at work. According to his biographer, who was his lawyer for decades, he was a total failure in his personal relationships. He was married 4 times. He was incapable of being, faithful to his wives, and he was not a regular part of the lives of his children. So, not everything is what it appears to be. And on this teaching, Rabbi Mark Angel quotes an ancient Greek legend about a man named Anteos. Anteos was a giant wrestler, incredibly strong, and he invariably destroyed his opponents. And then he met Hercules. How did Hercules defeat Anteos? He lifted him off the ground. As long as Anteos stood firmly on earth, nobody could beat him. Once he was uprooted, his strength left him. So, people who are well-grounded can withstand almost anything. And the Torah provides us with the means for a grounded and focused life. What does it really mean to be a good person? Some people think being a good person just means don't hurt anybody. Our teaching means, the goal is more than just the most basic decency. We should expect more of ourselves than the bare minimum. We're supposed to have a table greater than kings and a crown greater than their crown. You don't get that by doing the minimum. We're told to remember that the majesty of kings is just store-bought finery. The rewards of Torah are lasting wealth, representing the right to live in God's presence and in the company of the righteous. So, comments or questions up to here? All right, then. Now we have a very lengthy piece, right? And this will probably take us through the rest of our time. It says Torah is greater than priesthood and royalty, right? That's a theme we've already heard. Royalty is acquired through 30 virtues and priesthood through 24. Torah, however, is acquired through 48 virtues. And he's got a list, every single one of them, right? And we'll talk a little bit about each one of them. But, there a few, just something general about this, that many of these qualities involve memory, right? And we know that in Judaism, memory is a part of many rituals that we experience on Shabbat, on holidays, right? You grow up with memories from your childhood seders. If you grow up in a home where Shabbat is kept, so that's one of those memories. You grow up and you hear the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, and that becomes one of those memories that you stockpile. And so that's part of what builds a Jewish identity, is memory, right? And the truth is that secular law in Judaism is also based on referrals to different pieces of the Talmud and commentaries of past centuries. And so, as one person put it, Jews are continually the witnesses of our own past. It's like, things move forward and stay still at the same time. Because we're always moving forward. We can't stop that. But we also bring with us so much that comes from before. So that's something that, with many of these qualities, is essential. So what are the qualities through which one acquires Torah? Number one is study, right? Obviously, you have to make time for Torah in order to learn it. Number two, attentiveness, careful listening, right? You have to be willing to be receptive to the message. You have to pay attention to it, right? You don't just, you don't just see the burning bush if you're Moses in the wilderness. You notice it. You pay attention to it. Because otherwise, how would Moses have noticed that the bush was not being consumed, that there was something special about that? Number three is a little bit surprising. This is arichat sfatayim, proper enunciation, orderly speech, precise speech. In other words, when you learn a text, learn it right the first time. Verbalize it correctly, and then you'll be more likely to remember it correctly. Remember that this is, this is from people who grew up primarily in an oral culture, where not so much was written down. And for us today, this is especially true if you're learning to perform certain rituals, if you're learning how to lead a service, learning how to read Torah. Those are valuable things, but do it with proper learning the first time. Pay attention to it the first time, and you won't waste time having to unlearn it and relearn it when you practice later on. Right? So I'm going to continue through this, but stop me wherever you have a comment or a question, okay? Right? Number four, binat halev and sikul halev, understanding heart, perceptive heart. Really, this is considered one thing together. We often perform mitzvot very mechanically. To some degree, that's inevitable. You get familiar with certain things and you tend to do them without necessarily thinking about them. But ultimately, you have to have your heart in it if you want to integrate the message of that particular ritual or those particular words. Okay? Number five is awe, ema. This, I think, refers to having reverence for the teacher who transmits the Torah. The next one is yira, fear. Well, fear, but it's not just fear, it's reverence for the Torah itself, recognizing the greatness of the Torah and revering those who make it their business to teach it. Okay? Next is anava, humility. So, if you truly appreciate the magnitude of Torah, then you have to be humbled by how vast it is and how much it has to teach us. Okay? Next is joy. Right? Because if you appreciate the opportunity to live by the Torah, you should feel glad that you get to be part of it. Right? Some people think that living by the Torah is just this big weight on us. And the rabbis constantly emphasize that you really should feel simcha shel mitzvah. You should feel the joy of being able to perform mitzvot and not feel that they're just this obligation that saps our time and energy. Right? So simcha, be glad that you have the opportunity to be part of Torah, to live a life of Torah. Now the next one might seem a little anachronistic. It's called Shimush Chachamim, ministering to the sages. And what it referred to is, if you wanted to live by the Torah, you have to see how it works among the people who are already immersed in it. And so students would follow their teachers around. This could probably get annoying to the teachers, but, and I'll tell you, I appreciate the fact that people don't follow me around and, want to know how I do everything I do. It can be a little bit much. But that's what students of Torah typically did in this period. They followed their teachers around and watched them do the normal things of life. And they learned from them. Sometimes maybe they learned how not to do something for themselves, but they learned a lot from just watching their teachers and seeing how they lived the regular things in their lives. Moving on, this is number 10, Dubuque Chaverim, cleaving to colleagues. When you work out certain problems with your colleagues, with your friends, you realize that you're not on your own. You're not alone, right? You're part of a group that is really struggling to learn wisdom, to develop a whole approach to life. Right? You're not at this on your own. So hang around with others who are working on the same things that you are, and you'll learn from them too, and you'll know that you're not alone. Right? The next one is Pilpul HaTalmidim, probing discussions with students. This is the normal way of learning in yeshivas, in advanced schools of Jewish learning. When you have an idea, when you get a theme into your head, or you get an interpretation of a text, you try it out on other people and you let them critique it. And you'll get an idea, whether your idea is really sound or maybe other people have a better handle on it than you do. Okay? The next one is Yishuv. Yishuv is calm deliberation, right? So, the Torah student is supposed to be someone who is eager for knowledge, but doesn't mean you should rush to conclusions, right? Be patient, have all the discussion you need to get other people's viewpoints, and then you'll work things out to the proper result, or at least you will be more likely to do that. Mikra, the study of scripture, which after all is the foundation for all of Jewish learning, and Mishnah, the oral law, which follows on the text of scripture. Okay? Because those are the basic texts of Judaism in the time of Pirkei Avot. And the next one is miut schora, moderate your business activity. So yes, you have to support your family, but you have to keep that in line with the bigger priorities. Because you can be rich or you can be wise, but most of us are not going to be both. So make your choice, right? Miut shena, a minimum of sleep. So if you get excited at the idea of learning, get out of bed a little bit earlier and stretch your day just a little bit. Miut sikha, a minimum of small talk. So, we all can cut down on the trivia of life. Maybe spend a little less time on Facebook and, Twitter and so forth. Right? And then miut ta'anug, a minimum of worldly pleasure. Because they're all things that we enjoy, but that are not necessarily worth enjoying. Right? So we can be more discriminating about that. Miut tzchok, a minimum of jesting, a minimum of frivolity, of horsing around, right? Because ultimately, it's fine to look at life with a sense of humor and not take yourself too seriously. But in the end, life is a serious business. So most of the time, you want to focus on what's really important. Number 20, miut derech eretz. Here it means a minimum of worldly pursuits. So you have to make a living, but your living is not your character. It's not your life. And the next one, erech apayim, patience, being slow to anger. Being slow to anger is so important because 9 times out of 10, anger is the wrong response. So make sure that you keep your anger in check. Save it for those few times when you really need it. Because patience is what people really appreciate. Okay? You need a lev tov, a good heart, a generous heart. So be the kind of person who's generous towards other people in the sense that, when someone else accomplishes something, be happy for them. Be happy for what they were able to do. And don't be jealous and say, God, I wish I'd done that. I wish I had gotten credit for that. Or I should have gotten credit for something that I did. Right? Be happy for what they got. Emunat chachamim. Trust in the sages. Trusting in those who are wise. Doesn't mean you automatically follow them, but trust that they have something worthwhile to tell you. And that you should give it serious consideration. Kabbalat yisurin, acceptance of suffering. So when something bad happens, don't give up your faith just because you don't understand how such a thing could happen. By all means, question God. We Jews are very good at that. We do it all the time. But don't blame God for suffering when it happens. Because suffering is an inevitable part of life. Right? So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't cry out about it. But remember that the fact that there is suffering doesn't invalidate religion, and it doesn't mean there isn't a God. Makir et makomo, knowing one's place. And this also goes together with acceptance of suffering. Because when you chart the ups and downs of life, you shouldn't assume that, your life is so exalted that you're never going to have any suffering. Some suffering just happens. And if you recognize that you're just an ordinary person, then you're going to be less likely to lash out at God for the low points and the tragedies. Actually, it says, makir et makomo, knowing one's place. The word makom is another name for God, right? Ha-makom, the one who is every place. And maybe you just have to know that God is everywhere. Right? To be sameach bechelko, right? To be happy with our portion, contentment with one's lot. Right? Back in chapter 4 of Pirkei Avot, we learned that one who is truly rich is a person who is happy with what he or she has, who appreciates and values the good things in life, even if they're not the same package that somebody else might have. The next one is ha'oseh siag lidvarav, to guard one's speech. Put a fence around his words, literally. And we also, the teaching of Shammai, back in chapter 1 of Pirkei Avot, say little and do much. And that's also the way of Torah, the path of wisdom. There's less that we need to say than we often say. The next one, Eino machazik tova liatzmo. Don't take personal credit for one's accomplishments. Because whatever you do, remember that it's what we were supposed to do. This is what you were created for. That's what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai taught back in chapter 2 of Pirkei Avot. Don't be so proud of your accomplishments because, zelachach notzarta, this is what you were created for. The next one is to be ahuv, to be beloved, right? Because other people will see that you're not arrogant, that you're an unassuming person. And you don't have to live for other people's admiration. But if you don't have some admiration from other people, then maybe there's something else you need to be doing. The next one is ohev et hamakom, loving God, literally loving the one who is everywhere. Because if you really value God's gift of Torah, then you should come to love God itself. Right? To be ohev et habriyut, love other people. So if you love God, you have to show love for God's most precious creation, for human beings. And the next one is ohev et hatzedakot, loving acts of tzedakah, charitable acts. You can't just love people in the abstract. You have to love doing the things that help them, that make their lives more bearable. To be ohev et hamesharim, loving decency. You have to love doing things that maintain dignity for other people. To be ohev et hatochachot, loving rebuke. Your dignity is important, but you should never be above criticism or wanting to become a better person. The next one, mitrachek min hakavod, shunning honor. Whatever you've achieved, you don't do it for recognition. You do it because it was the right thing for you to do, and you don't need to get special credit for it. Lo magis libo b'talmudo, not boasting of one's learning. Because if you've really achieved something, you don't need to hear about it. You should just, know it, and that's enough. Eino sameach bahora'ah, not delighting in giving rulings, right? You don't need to force Torah on others, right? Hopefully people pick up Torah or, the beauty of Jewish life by seeing it in action. They don't usually get it by, somebody saying, this is what you need to do. Right? You don't need to give, if you're one of the sages, you don't need to give more rulings. Just live the life that you're supposed to be living. No say ba'ol im chavero, sharing the burdens with one's fellows. Right? You can't be a Torah scholar and be detached from other people's problems. You have to be involved in the lives of of other people and be willing to take on some of their responsibilities. Machrio lechaf zechut, influencing others to a life of virtue. Right? You got to set an example that other people will want to follow if you're going to be righteous. Right? Ma'amido al ha'emet, setting others on the path of truth. We like to say, mind your own business. It's good advice much of the time, but it's not enough. You can't mind your own business all the time. Sometimes you need to guide people in the right direction. Now we're up to number 41 out of 48. We're getting there. Ma'amido al hashalom, setting others on the path of peace. Okay? You want people to prioritize truth, but sometimes you have to prioritize peace. Get along with others even when they don't recognize the truth. Sometimes just getting along and making peace with people is as important as anything else. And sometimes it even takes precedence over the path of truth. Right? I may have a lot of answers to the problems of society, but I still have to get along with society. And I'm not likely to be able to persuade anyone about those solutions unless I have a peaceful relationship with them. Okay? Mit yashev betalmudo, concentrating on one's studies. Because even after you've learned enough to teach others, you still have to focus and continue to go and grow in your own learning. Shoelu meshiv, asking and answering questions. And dealing with questions, of course, that's a good Jewish thing, right? But it's a Jewish thing because it's a key to expanding what you've learned. Shomea umosif, absorbing knowledge and contributing to it. Because when you learn new insights, then you build up the reservoir of knowledge within the entire Jewish community. Halomed al manat lelamed, learning in order to teach. Because if you can learn something well enough in order to explain it coherently to someone else, then you've really learned it. That's the acid test. Halomed al manat la'asot, learning in order to perform mitzvot. You can't allow Jewish learning to be an academic exercise. You have to put it to use. These things go well together because when you teach something, you're also helping another person to be able to practice it. Hamachkim et rabo, one who sharpens the wisdom of one's teacher. So this suggests that the student shouldn't just simply repeat what they've learned, but they should add to it and broaden it and question it and treat it as dynamic rather than just static information. When it comes to the Torah, the rabbis didn't feel limited to interpret it, according to its original intent. If they could reinterpret it within the rules, so be it. That was fine. And the last thing on the list, ha-mechavein et shmuato, faithfully transmitting exactly what he has heard. It's one thing to reinterpret Torah. It's another to alter what has been passed down. You can't sharpen the Torah if you're not faithful to the Torah. And the sages add to this quality, ha-omer b'shem omro, you must quote your source accurately. Because when you teach something you heard before, acknowledge the source. And I suspect that the sages had some concerns about plagiarism. They put a lot of emphasis on the virtue of reporting a teaching in the name of the author. And when you do that, you are admitting without embarrassment that somebody else uncovered something that I wouldn't have known from the outset. And so these teachings benefit everybody, and by reporting them, we're showing gratitude to the ones who are responsible for those insights. And we avoid the possibility that anybody would think that we're taking credit for ourselves. And the Talmud is filled with all these teachings where one rabbi quotes another rabbi who heard it from a third rabbi over and over again. And it's not just a virtue to cite your source. Our teaching says it brings redemption to the world. And the proof text comes from the verse where Esther quotes Mordecai, right? Remember the part of the Megillah where Esther finds out from Mordecai that two men were plotting to kill the king. She could have just told the king, but she mentions that Mordecai was the source. And so she places the king in Mordecai's debt, which ultimately brings redemption to the Jews. One of the broad themes that comes out of this list of 48 principles is that you have to build learning on basic moral principles. You can't have one life in the synagogue and the study group and another one outside. You have to walk the walk all the way around. You have to be humble and kind and share the burdens and receptive to criticism, give everybody else the benefit of the doubt. You have to be a peacemaker in a world that doesn't always appreciate peacemakers. You know, we're a very polarized society, right? Peacemakers are not often honored in a polarized society. But one other broad theme from this list of principles, and with this I'll finish, is the assumption that you set proper priorities. If you want to be a sage, you put study first. Pursuing life's pleasures, well, that takes a backseat. There are lots of good and moral things you could be doing which can help you rationalize not having what you need at the top of your priority list. And if you ignore that reality, you're not going to learn. So you have to put in the time. So this is the very comprehensive list of virtues of Torah. And I once read a very lengthy Devar Torah about this list written by the dean of a rabbinical school. He said, you know, these are the 48 virtues, these are the virtues that you as rabbis in training should cultivate. Okay? I think it's a great list for rabbis, and it's not a bad list for any Jew. Okay? So comments and questions before we close.
It's a long list.
That it is. Yeah. Whoever said life was simple, right, Lou?
It would take a while to learn all of that.
Well, I know. I'm not claiming to have learned them all to the degree I would like.
I have a small question.
Yeah, please, Roberto.
To study Torah, do you need to know Hebrew or not?
Well, you know, there are limitations if you don't know Hebrew. I would say the more Hebrew you learn, the more Torah you can learn. Right? Obviously, there's a lot that is available in translation. And you can even study Torah. I mean, you can study Talmud in translation. I wouldn't say you would get all the nuances, but you can learn it. Right? And sometimes very helpful to have a translation with you, even if you know the Hebrew. But ultimately, you can learn. It just means that there are some limits.
Yeah, the question is because I'm pretty bad in Hebrew, so that's why I was wondering.
Aren't we all?
Well, so this is where most of us American Jews are because, Hebrew was not considered an essential part of Jewish education outside of day school,
Yeah.
right? What did we learn in Hebrew? We learned basically what we needed to learn in order to do what we were going to do at our B'nai Mitzvah,
Correct.
right? But learning what you learned for Bar Mitzvah is not learning what you need for a life of Torah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Missed
Thank
the physical
you.
class at noon.
Thank you.
Hope to see you later.
See you then.